doing it and the understanding that they're doing it. And then the second part would be helping them find that balance between the world isn't going to end, or that child that you're worrying about who's not home will be okay until you see them again the next day. Or I do literally have some providers who work 24/7. There is not an hour in the day from Sunday to Friday or Saturday where they don't have children in care. So for those ladies, it's finding that time where they have to be on at all times, but having those quieter moments where they can still have their family with somebody else's child there with them. Making sure that they're finding that balance, even while there are children in the home sometimes. So for example, a lady who does care, she has children who sleep overnight, they're there all weekend. We expect that if your children have, for example, swimming lessons, that child will go to swimming lessons. Or if there's a karate class, then that child will either go watch karate or they'll be enrolled in karate. And the reason for that is that's the experience they would get at home with their parents during those hours. And so that's what they're missing out on. So we would want them to continue to receive that. And that then supports the provider in being able to have that special family time and not miss out on everything. And be able to have a nice balance there between the two.
So these, just out of curiosity, so for this extended care, if you will, because that would be non-traditional hours of like evening and sleepover and all that, is that something that your company endorses, or is that something that the home provider is doing in addition to the work that they do with you, out of curiosity?
No, we endorse that. It's not very often that we have, so I deal with 21 ladies, and I would say 4 of the 21 do that. Our company itself works with around 60 home child care providers, and we probably have about 10 who do extreme extended hours. We have more than that would do like a weekend, maybe till 7 o'clock in the evening, but probably at most 10 who would do the overnight or start at 4 in the morning or those types of things. It is a benefit of home child care to families that is an option out there for them, and that these women are willing to take that on because it's in their home, and so it's a different level of what's expected from them at 4 o'clock in the morning. Basically, they're opening the door, they're putting the child back to sleep, and they're going back to sleep themselves. So there is that opportunity for different levels of childcare in their home.
So it sounds like these professionals make a choice, a life choice, and kind of figure out where their personal space begins and where their professional space ends, and where their professional space begins and their personal life may or may not end, right? That it's subsumed and it's intersect, especially in this home child care business, it sounds like.
Yeah, and it is something that we talk to them about in the interview. Before we bring them on, is things like, how will this affect your family, you having a home child care business? How will your husband feel if he's a shift worker and he wakes up at 3:30 in the afternoon and there are 6 rambunctious children running around your home plus your own? How are they going to feel about these things? Will your children be okay with the fact that they have to share their toys and those types of things? So we do try and set them up for success in the beginning, asking those little bit of harder questions that maybe they haven't considered or haven't been willing to consider yet, to make sure that if they haven't got the answer right then in the interview, is something that they're now thinking about.
Absolutely. Sounds like it's a very supportive and well thought out initiation / startup intake process, which is really refreshing to hear, because it sounds like not all home child care providers, again, think with that professional hat, right? It's an extension of the taboo word babysitting, and so really getting them to transition and really be, I think, reflective, it sounds like.
Yes, exactly.
So earlier we spoke about personal and professional boundaries and those sort of domains, and linking it back to people who are pre-service, RECEs, meaning those who are sort of in colleges or universities. What would you say to them in terms of how to figure out and sort out when to negotiate, like when to kind of remain private with certain things about their own life experience and journey, and when to kind of remain completely in the professional domain. What would you say in terms of what pre-service our ECs should know or should be exposed to in their training?
Right. And that, I think, is something that as professionals we're still learning. I don't think you'll ever have that perfect. I think it's something that can even change depending on the group that you're working with, the position that you're working with. But for those who have not finished schooling yet, I think reminding them that sometimes it's the other person's story, and if your information is going to add and help to their story, then I think it's okay to share. So, for example, I had a parent who was really, do you know what Type Talk is?
TED Talk?
No, Type Talk?
No, what is that?
Okay, so it's a company here within the southwestern area that helps with speech and language development.
Oh, okay.
There's not necessarily there's not a bad feeling about it within the childcare community, but there tends to be a little bit of a bad feeling about it to parents, like, oh, your child had to go to Tag Talk, that kind of feeling. So I did have a parent who was really struggling with the idea of having to call Type Talk for help for their child. And so I shared in that moment that my son had gone to Type Talk and sort of what the process was, because I knew that there was a little bit of a hesitation because they didn't know what to expect. So I shared not necessarily about my son, but this is what we went through. First, they talked on the phone, then they did this, then they did this, giving them more of the steps of what would happen. And that parent was very thankful for that share of mine, because one, she said to me, I realized that if you could have a kid who went to Type Talk, then it's okay that my child might need Type Talk. Because she looked at me as a professional, for her to see that the professional had a child who needed this help and services as well, didn't put that shunning to the group anymore. And having the knowledge of the steps and processes of how it worked made her less nervous about making that initial call and help. So I think in that situation, it benefited her because it was adding to her story. It wasn't about my story and what happened to me. It was giving her experiences that would help her story continue. And so I would think it would be trying to explain to someone who isn't in the role yet, which is really tough, about making sure that you're not, oh yeah, sometimes you hear people, they tell you a story and then someone goes, oh yeah, well, and then they tell you how their story is so much worse, or they broke their ankle, or those types of things. So making sure that that's not the kind of sharing that they're doing. It's more to the benefit of the person sharing, if they need to share at all. Sometimes it's just, oh, that's really terrible that happened to you, and that's the end of it, right? You don't necessarily always have to give more back to someone.
So as I'm looking at so we started our conversation with a little bit about your background, then we sort of went right into sort of all these performances of care, both as mom and as a professional, and then we're sort of kind of drawing to the end here, because we're moving now into what can we do to prepare future ECEs who may or may not be moms already, given that, we have a really high proportion of female in this profession. If a student asked you, so Christy, tell me, what does it mean to be engaged in a performance of care? What might you say?
That's a really hard question. I think that I would tell them